Hey everybody, it's Jason Blah here, and I'm just sitting here drinking my morning coffee. Thought I would do another informative video for you guys here before the sun even comes up. I'm getting my day started. And that's this topic of that people oftentimes fail to grasp when we see these different extremes in the online fitness community, that exercise science is an applied science. And one of the things that I've noticed repeatedly, and what you see so often, is that you have a lot of guys who consider themselves to be evidence-based. They'll put out a great deal of scientific sounding mumbo jumbo. And the problem that ends up happening is that a lot of these guys end up getting less results than the guys who spout bro science. And I'll get into kind of some examples of what I'm talking about, but there's been several YouTubers who've been doing this since I actually started on here. And a couple of them faded out. If you guys remember, like Sebastian Sunnit and Ian McCarthy are perfect examples of guys who would spout a lot of scientific jargon, but while things they were saying would be scientifically true as far as exercise science, or seemed to be true in terms of physiology, they were completely unable to apply it in the human body. In other words, they were unable to gain reasonable size and strength in themselves, and even in other people they worked with and gave advice to, even though everything sounded really, really good. And there's other smaller channels that are popping up now kind of doing the same thing, and they might put out some interesting information, but oftentimes what they're saying isn't particularly useful or helpful. And we kind of get into the problem of, are they just discussing academic facts? Are they just discussing observations we have of the human body? In terms used associated with these different elements of exercise science, or are they able to actually apply any of it? And oftentimes they're not able to do the latter. And then by that same token, we will see guys who are total bro scientists. They get good results. They might even coach people who get good results, oftentimes even without drugs. But then they literally have no idea what they're talking about. And oftentimes you will see them misunderstand what they're saying. Like, they'll know that something works because they've observed it in 37 of their clients or people they've worked with or seen or athletes over the years, but they'll completely misunderstand why it works, right? To the point to where they'll start coming up with ideas that they think are scientific, and then they'll start applying them in weird directions and do something that might even cause wheel spinning, might produce only 70 to 80% of the desired results, but they get enough right through just trial and error and experience and observing over the years that they end up actually getting really good results, in spite of the fact of completely misunderstanding the principles behind it. And that's kind of the interesting thing, is that these two worlds oftentimes do not always meet. And then you'll see tons of people go, well, yeah, that guy might be what you guys are calling a bro scientist, but his guys get good results. And that's ultimately what it comes down to, is that even though they may not always understand the principles and they might get a lot wrong, they've at least figured out elements of the stress recovery adaptation cycle enough to implement it in real people and understand that oftentimes these scientific principles, when we're trying to fine-tune stuff, are really only there to get that last 1 to 5% advantage. In other words, people could reach 90 to 95% of their potential without knowing any of this stuff. And then the problem we get into is that the people who want to focus on it so much, they get so focused on the minutia, the evidence-based people, that they forget the other stuff. I've oftentimes heard it called the 80-20 rule or the 90-10 rule, meaning usually people have a tendency to put 80% of their focus in the stuff that only accounts for 20% of their results, and then they forget the bigger picture. They forget the bigger picture. And what you'll oftentimes see with this, you'll see people who, they may talk all of these things, but then you watch them, and they have no strength, they have no size base, and they don't even always know how to correctly perform the exercises. They get caught up in these ideas that they think that they understand the principles of training, and then you watch them and they don't even know how to correctly execute something like a deadlift. meaning you're looking at it and there's all sorts of energy leaks. They don't understand how to use their levers, anything else, because they understand some basic concepts, but they don't really know how to apply it. Whereas then you will take someone who knows how to coach people and they could just clean that person's deadlift up in no time, and then all of a sudden that person would put 100 pounds on their deadlift. They would start gaining muscle strength, everything else. But they'll oftentimes not understand how to do this. And it's mainly because a lot of the science-based guys here, they don't understand how to apply the theoretical knowledge that they have in a dynamic human organism. And they don't understand how to bring all the components together. And it'll be to the point to where they might be able to talk to you a lot about whatever with eccentrics and time under tension and even fiber alignment in terms of how certain muscle fibers align with an exercise. But they can't figure out how wide to grip the bar or where to place their hips to correctly deadlift. All right? Or it doesn't occur to them that, maybe bouncing the bar off the floor on every rep on a deadlift might cause herniations of their disc and get a less effective training response for what you're trying to do. And just using the deadlift as one example, because all of these guys, when you watch them, almost all of them are weak on the deadlift, which again is indicative of some major muscle weaknesses in their body. The deadlift will find your weaknesses. That's what that exercise is really good at. It will let you know where you're weak in the kinetic chain. And a guy who's been training for 2 years and only can deadlift 300, 350 pounds, he's got some major weaknesses that haven't been addressed. And again, it's because these guys don't even figure out their technique. They don't know how to find their energy leaks, things like that. They don't understand biomechanics, even if they understand certain aspects of physiology and exercise science. And this is interesting because we see so much of it. And that's the funny part, is that so many people are so used to the bro science being spouted and they're sick of it. They're sick of basically ignorant ass meatheads trying to explain the human body to them, and they're sick of watching guys who do nothing but blast 2 grams of test with some growth hormone, who get jacked, who try to teach everyone, and everyone says, oh, well, they must know what they're doing. They're getting amazing results. And they spout nonsense and they get sick of that, so then they want evidence-based stuff, and then they jump over to all these guys who talk a good game. They will talk an amazing amount of scientific jargon, and it sounds really good, and they'll get their own followings, but these guys can't get bigger or stronger. And even people they work with and routines they put out, again, they get so caught up in the minutia that they don't understand the fundamentals. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we have in general, is that people out there are pushed with so much information and fine-tuning, whether it's on the bro end or whether it's coming from these evidence-based practitioners, that oftentimes they overlook the basics and they never learn the basics. They never learn how to perform the big exercises correctly to even build their base before they start trying to fine-tune all of this smaller stuff that shouldn't even matter. It might not even matter for the first 3 years you're training. And again, where you're trying to get that last little tiny bit of effect, when people then spend all their time chasing that little effect and not getting the big stuff. I mean, that's a perfect example. And then you watch it and they have no performance on the big basic exercises. They might be good at one of them, but they're not well-rounded in terms of their strength base. And if you're not well-rounded in terms of your strength base, everything is going to suffer. Your athleticism and other endeavors could suffer. You're going to have weaknesses. You're going to struggle with hypertrophy, everything else, because you've not created a situation to where you can even induce sufficient workload. You haven't built a strength base with enough work capacity to really get anywhere towards the other endeavors. And sometimes that comes down to just learning basic exercises and putting in some basic hard work. And that's the problem we get into, is, again, too much theoretical and not enough time just putting in time under the iron. Because ultimately, do you know what muscles respond to? They respond to tension and they respond to metabolic fatigue. That is what they respond to at the end of the day. And understanding the simplicity of that fact is part of understanding the application of the applied science of exercise science. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.
Ooh.